please continue. I just wanted to put some kind of some context around it.
Absolutely. Okay, so first I will go ahead and kind of just go over what information is included in this sheet. So first you'll see the first section, not under review, and total. Under review or not under review basically means if a property is under protest. So the values are broken down between whether or not the property is in protest. For the purpose of these calculations, that's not really important, but what we're looking for is the total value. So we take the total value and from that we subtract the frozen value. So this is the frozen value of properties that have any exemptions applied to them, such as 65 or older or veterans, etc. So when you subtract the frozen value from that total, you end up with your taxable value. And that is what we will apply the property tax rates to. So then you take, when you apply the property tax rate, you end up with a tax revenue on the freeze adjusted taxable value. From there, you add in the frozen levy. So the property that has exemptions on it, their levy doesn't change. So we know that we just add in the levy from those frozen values. So there you are left with your projected tax revenues. So comparing the projected tax revenues from 10%, 20%, etc., I compared them to what we currently have in our 2021 budget, which is a total of $835,000 with $600. So you'll see that, again, these are just estimated figures. After July 25th, the Denton County Appraisal District will certify these numbers, and those are the numbers that we will use officially moving forward. So these are just estimates, but if you compare the projected tax revenues against the budget, if we lower the property tax rate to 10%, we would get approximately the same as our budgeted last year. That is on the assumption that we have 100% collection rates. It's likely that they would be lower, around 98.5 collection rates. So really the 98.5 is a little more true. So you'll see that at 10% estimated about an $11,000 decrease, 20% a $91,000 decrease. At our current rate, a $68,000 increase, and at the no new revenue rate, a $33,000 increase. After all of these preliminary numbers, our current tax rate would need an election because it would exceed the it would need public hearings, possibly not an election, but it exceeds the no new revenue tax rate, which is kind of the benchmark before it triggers all of the public hearings or the possible election. So that's where we stand as of now for estimated figures.
So did you say if we keep it at the current rate, it would trigger the open hearing, or both the current rate and the no new revenue rate?
So what the legislature did is, instead of saying it's a percentage terms, they basically set it against what you're actually paying. So it's almost a combination of the increase that they give you for the property values plus whatever against, and then if you adjust your property rate or your tax rate, that affects it as well. But what they've done is, effectively, the county can raise our assessed value 10% a year is the max that they can do it. You legitimately cannot do that anymore without triggering public hearings.
So at the current rate, definitely would trigger public hearings. I'm not sure yet about an election. We'll know that for sure after July 25th, but it's very likely that at least public hearings and all the notices that would be involved with that.
So current rate throws us above the 10% threshold, or the 10%.
The no new revenue threshold, yes. The no new revenue rate is the threshold after which public hearings, elections, all of that is
Can go
possibly
above
triggered.
3.5%.
And your column for no new revenue rate would be the lowest we could, is where we would have to drop it to avoid the public hearing.
Correct.
The highest that we can charge without triggering.
Okay.
Correct.
lower 10%, then that would not trigger.
Correct. That
But
would
if you
not.
leave it like it is, it will. right?
Yes, correct.
So the public hearings would be just people come in and say they protest the tax. They come in. I mean, what would that?
Should be automatic.
Well, it's not. Oh, there we go. Sorry, I keep forgetting. I don't have my notes for all the trade. You still have to have a public meeting. So it just regards if you have to have a public hearing or a public meeting. And we'll go in detail on that on August 10th, because by state law, we have to present the it has to be presented to the council. We have to submit the no new revenue rate and the voter approval tax rate calculations to you. And you have to take action on a proposed rate. So at that time, once after we get the calculations and we have those, and we'll give you all of those figures on August 10th. The date is August 7th or as soon as after is practical. So the law is, it's saying the way they've written things. And you have to take a record vote on your proposed tax rate and at that meeting. And so at that time, we'll give you everything, what triggers. You have to have a public meeting regardless, and we have to have notices, whether it's a public meeting or a public hearing. So
You
we'll
have to
give you,
have notices, even if we are not, we're not going to go above.
correct, because it'll still be a notice for a public meeting. And we still have to, on the meeting on the
council meeting.
on the meeting on the 10th, we still have to do a notice of your action of the proposed rate, and we have to publish those notices, and it has to show a record vote of how everyone of
And
you
the meeting
voted
on the 10th is for what? For just this?
to receive submission of the no new revenue rate and the voter approval rate and your decision on what the proposed rate is going to be. That's mandated by the property
Can
tax.
we do that during the council meeting?
You have to do that on August 10th at your special council meeting. That is a special council meeting on August 10th. You have to take action that day
Why?
because state law mandates it.
State law mandates that you have to do it within a certain number of days.
You have to do it on August 7th or as soon there as practical, and that is the date that we set for that meeting.
Why is that the most practical day?
That's the date we set. It was August 7th or as soon as practical. And so we set it, instead of having the meeting on August 7th, we set it on August 10th because it was a Tuesday, or else we would have had to do it on August 7th.
Sweet.
We did as when we set the budget calendar.
It was already part of the budget. calendar.
Yeah, or so it would have had to been August 7th. So we bought us a couple more days and did it on August 10th.
I did, again, I'm not a fan of having a special meeting for something that really sounds like it should be rolled into something else. So next year, I want to make sure that we are a little more judicious, even if we put it on a council meeting, we wait 2 weeks. I don't think it was the intent of state legislature to have us call special sessions for something like this.
Any questions on the property tax rate? I'm glad to.
So we just need to decide if we want.
Nothing officially to decide today, just part of the conversation as we're, moving forward with the budget. The property tax rate will have to be decided by the August 10th meeting that Tammy was referring to.
So we're not needing 4 August 10th as approved, right?
Correct.
So we really need to come up with a consensus as to where we want to go today.
So we can't come up with that.
So
Won't
again,
be
this
a vote.
is the first time you've seen this. I had asked for the 10% reduction before I even knew that there was a.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got last year, again, take all the extra COVID funding that we got out. We still, we had more tax revenue last year than we've ever had before because of what's going on with Tractor Supply, because of what's going on. I mean, Marty B's is absolutely, you can't go over there without getting anything. So, again, my thought was, it's not a huge amount. Let's face it, a very small part of our property tax rate is in fact the municipal tax. But it's making a statement about the town and kind of where we stand from a tax perspective, especially with everything else that's going on right now. I mean, again, if you're not being driven crazy by what's happening at the federal level, I am. It's time to sit there. It's not a big hit on the town. We've got plenty of revenue to replace it. It's time to sit there and say we're against it.
So we're saying with that one, that's the 11,500 less.
Assuming we only get
Assuming-
98.5.
Collection rate. Yeah. And the rest of the budget information that we'll talk about after this is with the property tax rate revenue set at a 10% reduction in
So
the
it's
rate.
with that one. Okay, good. So
Yes.
it's already got
Yeah,
that.
so everything
baked
we'll,
in.
we'll
Okay.
discuss today will be under that assumption of the 10% reduction. So if there's no other questions,
That's
I
good.
can go on to the general fund.
Please.
Okay.
Oh, I believe it too. I was gonna say,
Yeah.
What's exactly-
Hey, you make letters on it.
It's not who you are, it's what you perceive to do.
Okay, so not many major changes were made to the budget really since the last time that we met last month. You'll see here, there were some slight changes made, actual increases really to the mixed beverage tax rates, the sales tax, those were both increased. The telephone franchise fee was reduced slightly due to legislation changes, just from 22,000 to 15,000, so not a big decrease overall. And solid waste franchise fee was increased from 16 to 20. So when you take in all of the general fund revenues, there's a 1.787 million in total.
Particularly sales and mixed beverage.
90,
This is two big buckets, right?
sales tax, we have,
50,
yes,
and then mixed beverage was going up 40. So if I looked at the adopted versus proposed, it's about 90K. So that's really what's coming.
Just make that Josh, I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just saying the difference between the adopted and the proposed is about 90,000, which is basically the increase in sales tax and mixed beverage. So
Yeah. compared last year to
Compared to
this year.
last year,
Yeah,
We'll be before in September, we'll be bringing forward a budget amendment with the amendment for the sales tax, because the sales tax has surpassed what's been brought in and with the expenditures in the current budget. Oh, Lance.
so total of 1.787. If you go to the next page, that's the general fund expenditures, and they're broken down by administration, police, court, and transfers. From the last time that the budget was presented, there were some figures that weren't finalized for, retirement, workers' comp, all of the insurance rates, those variables. So those have been finalized. You'll also see that contracted services have gone up. And that's based on all of the number of developments that have come this year. Within the last 4 to 6 months, we have 3, possibly 4 subdivisions in the works and 2 new commercial ventures in the works, which has required an extensive or an increased amount of planning and engineering services. Part of the administrator's report that I'll present later at the regular meeting is that we do have abilities to recoup some of those costs in our current fee structure. So that's something that we're going to, make sure that we're applying just in case that any reviews associated with applications go over the application fee. So just wanted to make you all aware of that.
So is there, obviously our intent is not to make money off of these things, but to be neutral. So have you done the calculations on what we may need to raise these to in order to meet all of our costs?
Yeah, that's definitely something that we've talked about, Tammy and I. We have talked about doing research on the fee structure. We definitely have encountered some fees that we need to add into our fee structure. So that is something that we would like to present in the near future. So that's for administration. Those were the major changes. For police, we increased fuel from 8,000 to 12,000 on the assumption that the 3rd vehicle is going to be approved. And then something that did not make it to this round of the budget version, but should there be an approval for an additional officer, there might be an increase to the police overtime or also to the vehicle insurance line item if the third vehicle is approved as well.
At what point in time, so I want to have a conversation about the additional officer.
That's a great time.
Okay, so again, I was kind of surprised given the past discussions on that. We now have, right now, what is authorized is the chief, the sergeant, and 3 officers. Okay. We did a survey in 2018. And of that survey, of the people that responded, 72% were the chief, basically what we've got authorized right now. Now, I get where you're kind of going on this. What I think the primary reason for that was cost, which is why we put in the proposal to our friends at the Denton
Development District.
the Denton County Development District number 4 for them to pay for an officer. I have an issue with us saying we did a survey, 72% of our residents came back and said they're comfortable with that number or less, and we're going to overrule that. No, please, because I know there's a reason you propose that.
Yeah, the survey was based on, basically, I'm sure everybody saw a copy of it. It was based on, do you like what we have and we'll leave it the same? We won't raise your taxes. If you want another officer, we're going to raise your taxes by X amount. If you want 2 more, we'll raise them by X amount. Or if you want us to reduce the police force, we can lower your taxes. That was the basis of the survey. I think in the last three years or so, we've had more things happen in town. I think one of the things is that for me is the safety of residents. We're not going to stop crime. That happens. I don't think a big police force is going to stop that, but someone needs to investigate it when it happens. And I'd like to see our officers more on the street rather than sitting in the office doing paperwork, because we're paying them a lot of money to do paperwork. Some of that they have to do, some of it I think Lance or somebody can do. Plus we're having more, we're having an aging population. We're having more people that are wandering off. We're having people that get in accidents and things like that. Just weird stuff going on that somebody needs to deal with. I think there's some other things going on. People are picking up things on their cameras at night. There's nobody here to look at that or take care of it. People running through people's yards and stuff like that. So I think there's just more things that are happening that we just probably need to go ahead and go 24/7.
So I guess what I would propose on that is this was done 3 years ago, and it didn't take very long to survey the town. If this is something that we, again, want to change the results of that, I would propose we put another survey out there. It won't take very long. We can always amend it.
I think it would be, I don't think we should tie it to the budget though and say, if you want more police officers, we're going to raise your taxes, yes or no. I think we should just say, are you interested in going 24/7, yes or no, whatever.
Saying is, it does have to be revenue neutral when you speak about this, because you go back out there on the streets now and you ask the citizens,
But-
have additional officer where they want to go 24/7, and you don't talk about the fund, but it costs them more money, and they say, well, yeah. But if you word it such that, are you willing to pay that $1,411, excuse me, for one officer, or the $141, it makes a difference the way you word that. Now, you go back and by talking with the officers and the chief and looking back at some of these past records, in 2016, in August of 2016, we had 231. This is the activity of what some of the reports that the chief gives to us on the activity that's increased in numbers. We had 231 in August of 2016. That's total calls. That's self-initiated traffic. 5 years later, in 2021, June, this past month, we jumped up to 154 calls for service, 421 for self-initiated. That's 575 calls. Now, those 3 officers. Now, go back to 2016. We had, we had Corey, we had Bobby, we had Lance, and we had Jerry.
The way we count them is different. We can't. The numbers are higher now than they used to be because of the way they count them. So it's not. The problem is that's not an. I get where you're going, Clay, but it's not an apples to apples comparison. My question is, so again, if we're willing to consider a survey, then the survey doesn't need to say your taxes are gonna go up or down, but we just specify what the cost is gonna be. Right now, you know, the cost that we gave for an officer, I think, was 81,000. But that's an officer walking in, excuse the expression, but basically unclothed. No uniforms, no cost of being in a vehicle. I mean, the gas price, if we had a third vehicle, gas price shouldn't go up. Because again, we've still got the same number of driving. If we say we're raising it because we think fuel prices are going up, great, but whether we have 2 officers or 3 officers, they're only driving 1 car at a time. So your fuel prices should not be going up. If we add another officer, it's at 81,000 plus the cost of uniforms, plus the cost of training, plus the driving of the additional miles, which is all fine. You know, you're at roughly, again, somewhere between 90 and 100,000. Put a survey out there that says, hey, are you willing, you know, do you want another officer? And the additional officer cost will be $90,000. Don't put in there that we're going to raise budget, you know, that we're going to raise tax or anything else, but give them a number and let them decide what they want to do. Now, still go forward with trying to get the officer funded by the Denton County Development District number 4, DDDC, or DDCD. Okay, okay, I'll have to work on it. That gets us 1 officer that, again, they're potentially paying for. And I think they're going to approve it. I'm going to be surprised if they don't, because we do a lot of, this is this is that quarter-cent sales tax that goes from the Lantana Town Center over to those guys. They should be willing to fund an officer. We respond there a lot. That gets you 1 more officer, so it gets you closer where you want. If you want to look at more, again, I think we need to resurvey the town, because it wasn't that long ago that they said, no, that's not what they want. And if we want to rephrase it, because you know, we're not comfortable with the way the phrase is done before, you know, let's adjust it to something that we can all feel comfortable with, that compromises and just says there is a cost associated with it, but does not state that, you know, taxes will go up.
I think we can all agree that their workload has increased. It's gone up. First of all, we've added, in that time, when Flock Campbell first come on in August of 2020, we had 507,000 counts. Last month, we had 538. That's just inside Bartonville. That's not out there. So that alone is going to put, well, let me say this. The last month, I spent some time out at Tractor Supply, and I would come back and sit over there at Saddlebrook and watching vehicles that were passing through. And the only way I could verify that was following. I would have some come behind me, and 2 of them was like 10 days ago, were on my tail end. I ended up going 34 miles an hour and 25 miles over to get them off because they were blinking the lights at me. I thought it was an emergency. So I pulled over, I let them go by. I stayed on and went through Frenchtown, the stop sign there, went out to 407, not 407, they turned straight on Frenchtown and went to 377, 1 turn north and 1 turn west. Both of them came off 407, they're straight through traffic. And all the officers will tell you, on an average day, look at their tickets and see what they write. The majority of everything that comes through here is all passed through. Now, having said that, you take the count of the flock, those calls, 575 calls, that's a lot of calls, no matter how you count them, whether you counted them in 2016 or whether you counted them in 2021. Those have to be done by primarily 3 officers. And if you look at the service calls, writing citations, stations, tickets, that's burglaries, that's everything. That's total service calls. There was 575 for last month. Now, that's a lot of calls, and that's a lot of time that's being spent. Lance can verify the times that he spends out here sitting on that behind that desk trying to run paperwork. And Jessica, look at the report from last month, as well as Jerry. Give that kind of money to an officer. Just having them out there on the street, making presence known, will deter. Plus, if you look at some of these cameras, if you ever get a chance, go in there and sit down with Bobby and look at some of these videos and ask him to show you something that happens at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. There's nobody on.
So
we're lucky that it hadn't happened, something seriously hadn't happened, but personally, I think our responsibility is number one is safety to the citizens. That's number one. Second is the roads. And I certainly would be a proponent of making sure that our citizens stay safe. If it takes one more officer to do that, then I'm all for it.
How do you know that one more officer is going to make anything safe?
You don't know that it won't.
No, but again, we're saying, citizens, we asked you to
I
reply.
understand.
And you know what, now, yeah, we decided, no, we don't really care about the reply.
Probably about 11 people that I've talked to in the last 2 weeks and asked that question. What kind of police service do they want? If they want 24/7, they say, yeah, we don't talk about what it's gonna cost them money or what, they just say, yeah, I want that. That makes a change when you have you word that question.
So again, it's, I'm sorry, Jack, let me let you finish. and then I'll-
I was just going to ask Clay, would you be in favor of doing a survey or adding another officer now?
I think we really need need an officer because that's what the people are saying. The activities, you talk to the chief, you talk to the officers. The survey, I'm not against the survey. I just think we can, if they're going to justify it, and say, yeah, they need it, as long as we don't say, hey, it's going to cost you $141 a year, you want to pay it. You can make any survey come out the way you want it, by the way you vote.
So-
Hey,
The chief's always gonna want more officers.
well, sure.
The sergeant's always gonna want more officers. I mean, again, go to any governmental organization you ever want, they're always gonna want more of it. Now, we have, again, by the 27th of this month, we're gonna know whether DCDD number 4 is going to finance an officer. In which case, get another officer, don't really need a survey because again, we're not paying for it. So that becomes an additional resource. You get the officer you're looking for, doesn't hit the town budget because they pay for it, we move forward. If that does not happen, then we've got to decide what we want to do. And again, it's a question of, we did the survey. Clay, I get it. You talk to a lot of folks, but I would also tell you, yours, it's not a scientific survey.
it's not.
It's the folks you run along with, and we all get that. I mean, again, I don't know how many times I'll get the, hey, what about X, Y, and Z? And I'll sit there and say, I get it, and I understand that you're very passionate about this. The vast majority of the rest of town is not passionate about the subject. So I get what you want, but this is not an area where we're going to focus a lot of attention and time because we're not there.
So Bridget, how do you feel about it? If we get an officer, that's fine. If we don't, you want to do a survey or add someone?
In being in Saddlebrook, those are the neighbors that come and find me, and they just are not demanding, they're asking if I can do anything about 24-hour service. That's like the number one thing. They just want consistent 24-hour service. I am here to serve the people and do the will of the people. And if there's a survey that is written correctly, I don't know do we write that survey? Is it us that puts that out? So they understand that do you want 24-hour
survey, but again, we need to specify the cost. We don't have to put in there that says your taxes will go, are you willing to pay X, Y, or Z? But we need to, be honest and upfront with it to say, hey, this is what the cost of the town is.
I
And again,
understand.
I will tell you, I'm not, I don't have an issue with an additional officer, but I do have an issue with, we have a survey. We have, what the will of the people, those that decided to apply.
Yeah.
And that's where my concern is. And so if we're going to break that, especially, if the survey was 10 years old, that's when, you're going, it's massively dated.
It's 3 years,
But
right?
it's 3 years.
And the amount of growth, I think, is still
And the town may have gotten.
pretty
They're
substantial.
all of a sudden they're going, look, we've changed, we've now thought we would like to have 24/7 coverage, in which case, again, we can amend the budget to do that.
Yeah, well, what I hear, all I can go by is what I hear from, local residents and all through Saddlebrook, that they would appreciate 24-hour, coverage, whatever that looks like. They are concerned, next door, I try not to get involved, but you also see a lot of, ring cameras, incidences, suspicious cars. It's just kind of been an uptick overall. And so I know people are definitely concerned. I'm curious what an overall survey would look like, but having 407, having Vickery, having, all of the growth go in, they've just been making it known to me that they're starting to be concerned.
And
So-
that really has been historically the way it's been. Saddlebrook has
Yeah.
always been very pro-police.
Sure.
But I would also attribute part of that to the fact that Saddlebrook has concrete roads. So again, when
Yeah.
you're balancing roads versus that, that's kind of where you get. So I guess where are we at? Are we comfortable? And again, I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but are we comfortable saying, hey, let's see what we get on the 27th, which will happen before the end of this month. And then we can make a decision as to where we want to go. And then if, let's say for the sake of argument, we don't get it. Do we initiate a fairly quick survey to get a response back and use that? Because again, we can amend the budget. The budget, just because we said it, does not mean it's fixed in stone. We can amend the budget after the fact if we get a response that says, we want more police officers.
So what I,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
if we get that officer provided, so what, is that at no cost? I don't,
They
Is that-
pay the
have-
cost, they pay the cost for that officer.
yearly, annually,
They'll commit to 1 year.
vehicle, or just the cost?
What did we put in?
I don't have the grant application with me, but it was a starting salary officer plus benefits. And then some other miscellaneous equipment.
Okay. Good job.
Well, I definitely agree there's been an uptick, but I do also think that a survey would be in order.
I think we should add another officer.
Well, my opinion, I mean, I still stand. I would challenge each one of you to go out there in Bartonville and just when you see somebody, just say, hey, introduce yourself and say, what would you like to see with Bartonville and Police Department? Are you satisfied with the status quo?
So, and I would say on that, Clay, again, very unscientific and does not include, again, if that's where you want, what we want is just to get the voice of the citizens, then we should do a survey. I think we need to do a better job of the survey than what we did last time. And make it so that, if we've got to determine whether it's one per voter or one per household, and how do we limit it so that there is, only one vote per. But we can put some of those things in place.
Did we get about 150 responses last time? Do you remember? Y'all remember? We didn't even get 200, I don't think. So
Yeah, we got a total of 200.
you're getting a small fraction of the residents, but
But again, still more than you walking up to 5 people and asking them what they're opinion.
And see, well, we're not talking about people, but I can tell you this, in 2012, there's 1,590 citizens population. And in 2021, it's 1,750 people. Now you look at 15 to 1,750, all of a sudden you look at 200 more people. If we can get, of course, what's the response? Probably what, 20% is the max is what we got. I didn't think we did that. Did we? Do you remember, Tammy? What the percentage returns were on the survey?
I don't have the results in front of me.
Yeah, it was real low. But anyway, to me, I just kind of look at the facts and we have 80 more homes coming in. It's 3 subdivisions and surveys, contracts show that it averaged 2.62 people per home. Look at how many other people are going to be added to our population. All of a sudden you go from 1,700 up to almost 2,000 people. That's a lot of work for 2 officers. Now, if we get another officer, that will help. But I still think we're understaffed.
We have chief and 4 officers authorized. We're short 1 officer right now that we already have in the budget. The question is again, if you ask any resident, if you go to anybody and say, okay, Jim, do you want more police officers? And that's the question you ask. Jim's response is going to be absolutely. My response would be absolutely. Now, if you ask the question, do you want another officer, and each officer costs an additional $90,000 to the town, leave out the fact that your taxes are going to increase. Then that goes, do I want to pay another $90,000 for an officer?
I think the implication would be that you're going to, excuse me, you're going to raise taxes if you say, are you willing to pay X amount? We don't, put out surveys that say we'd like to do new roads. It's going to cost X amount. Do you think Bartonville needs more roads or better roads? We don't do that, but
I would say this, and I'll end it with this. If I have to justify within me, had we not had an officer on duty when Diane Golden laid out in that bar ditch, what would have happened? What would have happened if someone hadn't been able in time to be over there with Sonny at the lane after when a tractor crossed? It's just having someone available. If it took 15 minutes for someone to respond, you know what, 15 minutes is a lot. I don't care how much it costs, you can't buy that lot, and you can't tell the people that we're responsible as on the council of ensuring that our citizens stay safe, that we can justify not having done that. Now, I'm not saying putting officer on it will not prevent someone being shot down 7-Eleven or out here on 407 or back here, somebody screwing rugby. I'm not saying that that's going to prevent it, but I'm saying if you have someone here that can respond within 5 to 10 minutes, at least you got someone there to back over that can come back should we need it.
So again, then is it one officer? What if we have 2 incidents at the same time? What if we have, I mean, when we started this whole process, again, I go back to, I'm the one that's been sitting up here the longest. And I'm the one that inherited a budget that there was literally nothing left. It spent, I mean, we were running in a deficit, which is when we went and cut staffing and did a bunch of other things. I mean, people forget about what happened 9 years ago. And that's what we ended up getting into. We then did the survey because the survey was at the time, we were, very much of a, do we have enough money for roads? Do we have enough money for police officers? And that's why we did the survey. I think it's, again, my thing is right on that survey. And doing another survey isn't going to take a lot of time. We can do it in a couple of months. This is not, right now, Chief's in the process of trying to hire the replacement for Warren. And that's been going on for a couple of months. Even if you authorize the day, it's going to take a while. Let's take a step back. Again, I'm proposing we take a step back. You potentially get that additional officer without a cost to the town, because if we get it from DCDD, so you get an additional officer, you met what you're trying to do, and no harm, no foul. We move forward, we get the additional officer, and off we go. We don't get that, we do a survey, we talk about how we're going to phrase it. Jacqueline and I have concerns about this, so we'll work through and come up with a compromise as to how we phrase this. Because again, last time it was very much phrased, are you willing to do this much of an increase or this much of a decrease? Hey, we make some adjustments on it since this is what it's going to cost, and you can decide whether you want to do it without saying increase or decrease or anything else with that. And we figure out how we get a survey back that is, that ensures one vote per person. Who responds is who responds. I mean, just like, when we vote, not everybody votes.
Yes, Bridget, if we don't get the officer from B, what's it called?
DC number 4.
If we don't get the officer from them, would you be in favor of a survey or just adding another officer?
Well, I, again, want to do the will of the people. And everything I've heard is that they want another officer. They want 24/7. That's the thing. We don't discuss officers. They want 24/7 coverage. So if we need to reach out farther and we can word it correctly, because I understand that part, I'm good with a survey if it's worded correctly. Now, if we did a survey, people said yes, and we approved the budget for it, does that cancel out the DDC, whatever counts the county?
It's all on where you guys want to go. So, but if the addition is of one officer, well, then we wait to see if we get the results. If we get the results that are favorable, boom, we move forward. We got the additional officer. And then do see if we want to do more or less or different in the future. We can do another survey.
Gonna
One
put the
officer
cost-
short now.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead.
If we're going to put out a survey that says an additional officer is going to cost X amount, then I would like to add to the next sentence I would like to add would be, we're not going to raise taxes. This is what it's going to cost, but we're not going to raise your taxes.
Yeah.
So the implication is not, you're going to be paying more taxes if you approve this $90,000 budget item. I don't think that's a good way to do a survey because that's not what we're planning on doing.
No, it's not. But it needs to sit there and state that there's an impact with taking that off. I mean, again, it's some other survey that we're not, some other service that we're not paying for, or that we're doing something different. It could be less roads, it could be less, anything. And I'm still hopeful that First Ranch and our agreement with Jack and with the county commissioner on a very large lump sum that would allow us to do. And if we were able to do concrete roads, our budget problems go away for the rest of all of our lives. And you've got a lot of ability to do a lot of different things.
Mr. Mayor, you said earlier also, you talked about the revenue is the greatest that we've had so far. You're absolutely correct by that, because Sylvia looking at some of these numbers. I just want to make sure that we don't sit here and decide that we're going to try to evaluate the safety of our citizens against a dollar when the city is not, can't afford that officer. And to make sure that that safety out there is number one, whatever the friction is with the monies, I just don't want to tie down to because of the budget. I don't want that to be a part of, without going, because I'm a strict conservative when it comes to money. I live on my budget, and I probably live on less than most think. But anyway, that's because that's who I am. And I'm gonna spend the people's money. It's not mine, it's people's. But to me, number one is safety for these citizens out here. And I want to make sure that we as the council address that and hold that responsibility.
Safety within what we can afford and what makes sense from a judicial perspective. I mean, again, I spent 28 years carrying a rifle for this country. I mean, it is, and I also spent 28 years diving into dumpsters, pulling parts out because my troops didn't want to put them on to vehicles, or going to hurricane duty when money is flowing like water and telling senior officers, no, you're not going to do that because I reported it as waste, fraud, and abuse. You know, we have to sit there and my big thing is, again, I don't disagree with anything you're saying, but we have a survey. You know, our citizens have told us something. We took the time to sit there and ask them a question. They came back with a response, and now, you know, we're willing to nullify it without taking a couple of months to do a new survey. I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's reasonable because of anecdotal evidence of asking a question of, do you want more police coverage? Yes, absolutely, I want more police coverage, but without talking about the cost or anything else. And it's like everything else that get, you know, said, it's all about how you phrase it.
Yeah,
It's all
so
about
how are
the
you
rest
gonna
of the
phrase
story.
that with the citizens and not talk about the funds?
Oh, you have to talk about the funds. Because if you don't talk about the funds, again, what you're always going to, if you apply something that's going to be free, then absolutely everybody's going to want it.
I think we have to be very careful how we word this.
And again, we'll get together and we'll phrase it and we'll have to compromise because quite frankly, again, I don't think everybody's going to be fully happy with what it is, which is the art of the compromise. But you can't go out and survey something saying, do you want more of this without seeing what the cost is going to be? I mean, that's just like doing, you know, what the Democrats are doing in Congress right now. They're throwing money around like it's water and not talking about how they're going to pay for it. And we owe the citizens better than that.
Do have the money to pay for another officer. Correct? You would say, no, we need to put that into the road fund, right?
I would sit there and say, we need to, so as we move forward with the budget discussions, you know, one of the things I would propose is we pay off the road debt. Because we're in a position to be able to do that this year. We pay it off early. And then that gives us, hey, we've got certain funds left and we can decide how we want to fund them. Our roads, unfortunately, I mean, what we're seeing is we've done a lot of great work on the roads, but the roads will continue to be a problem until we can do something longer term is, you know, the only thing we have that's a long-term fix is potentially first range situation. If that works its way through. And who knows what it's going to do it right now, because the last conversation they had there between them and Flower Mound was a less than cordial discussion. So I just want to make sure that we have the funds available because I have been here and joined council when the funds were not available. When, you know, we were looking at options. I looked at options. I'm a big believer of 24/7 coverage, which is why I went and had the conversations with, you know, the council's approval at that point in time with Double Oak, potentially doing something with them so that we can get 24/7 coverage at the cost of that particular time. In the end, we decided not to go down that route for multitudes of reasons. But again, the biggest thing for me is there's a survey in front of us. I don't disagree with anything you're saying, but there's a survey in front of us that says the people have told us something, and we owe them to respect what they've told us. And now's the time to ask them again if we think it's changed.
Excuse me. I think if you put out any survey about any topic and you say, do you want this? And then, by the way, if you want it, your taxes are going to increase by X amount. People will more than likely say no.
And we just said that we're not going to put anything there about the taxes going up, but we need to specify there's a cost associated to it.
Third grade officer
Well,
gonna
we need
cost
to
us
start doing
$18,000 a year plus plus vehicle and uniform and leave it and then ask that. Without going into the dollar figure. Saying, hey, this is good. It's just all how you word it. And like I said,
And we need to, again, we need to word it so that it is, we're comfortable with it. It specifies, hey, do you want more coverage? Because I gotta tell you, that for the people that want more coverage, the fact that it is, that, that there's a $81,000 cost plus the vehicle, plus these other things. So again, I'm saying roughly $90,000 a year without actually going and trying to crunch the numbers. They're gonna sit there and say, go with it. And we may find that this survey, I have no preconceived notions. This survey may turn exactly the opposite direction. And we can sit there and say they want more police coverage. Too cool. Then I'll be the first one to sit there and say, let's do it. People have spoken. But we have something already where the people have spoken. And for us to turn it around, again, I get it. The people you're going to talk to about this, one is, I think you're not phrasing it that there's a cost associated with it. And the second piece is if people are going to come and talk to you about it, they're going to talk to you about it because it's a hot button issue for them, and we just need to understand where the entire town is. That's my only point. Again, let the town speak, and then we carry over. But again, I believe in another officer, which is why I directed the staff to put in the proposal to DCDD for an additional officer to fund it. I mean, I'm trying to get there by meeting what the town said they didn't want to do, but still get us additional coverage without a cost to us. We don't get it, do a survey. If the survey results come back, you guys look at it and say, hey, that's what we want to do, then that's fine. And yeah, you can. I mean, you can sit there and say you want another officer without doing a survey. Absolutely, that's again, that's well within your discretion, but I think you're not honoring the voice of the people that we got when we took the time to do the survey in 2018.
that should come back.
The 27th.
Yeah, it's this month. They're meeting this month.
And then the survey will take a couple months to get that, probably 3 months total. to get it
So
out
if
and
we, Clay, if we get this, and Jacqueline, if we get this officer and get it approved, is that sufficient or are you,
back. No, that's sufficient. If we get an officer approved, they didn't approve it last year, correct?
oh, okay.
We didn't ask them.
Okay.
Yeah, this is.
So what are the
we've done-
chances, like,
we've done
what-
some different things.
What, okay,
So there is now a Bartonville resident on the DCDD.
Uh-huh.
There was not. But
so we have a voice there.
we've got a voice, and that would, so we're in a much better position to do it. And I got to tell you, you talk to the Lantana residents, Lance just saved one of their lives. And 3 police cars showed up there, state car, county car, and our Bartonville car. The only one that had a defibrillator and saved that guy's life was a Bartonville car. Again, and I will tell you, I talked to people in Lantana, anecdotally, have not surveyed them. But I mean, again, they know that we are providing them services, and most of them think they're paying for them. And we've talked to,
Thankfully, we had an officer on duty.
absolutely, otherwise, again, that guy, that guy
Yeah.
would have been dead. They should help pay for that. So are we comfortable for waiting for the 27th? And if not, we'll do a survey?
My life, and that's just like that gentleman over in Lantana, in Lance City. But you talk to them and they tell you they give $1 million.
And again, Clay, I can sit there and take that out and say, we have 2 of those incidents happen at the same time. We have X, Y,
I'm
and
gonna
Z.
have to agree to disagree.
Well, again,
I think we should wait till the 27th and see if we get the officer. Then if we don't, we need to discuss this again, whether we want to just add one or move forward with the survey.
And yeah, who wrote the survey before? Was it council that puts together that survey?
council,
Or-
I
Jeff.
mean, staff starts it, the council approves it.
Okay, but we can all be in on that. Okay, okay.
If we do.
We're supportive of the way that the survey was phrased.
Yeah, it's changed. My position on that has changed in the last 3 years. Definitely has. I see more of a need for another officer. That's true. Things are different than they were 3 years ago. Yeah,
Let's survey and see.
Yep.
See where we're at.
reconvene.
Well, no, we can put it on the agenda. Yeah. Next.
Yes, I'll just, so to close out the general fund, depending on how things move forward with the police, right now we have an excess or a transfer needed for $142,000. So we can transfer that to our tax note fund. We can transfer that to the reserve fund to help build our reserve safety net for the town. So if
So-
there's a preference on where to direct that transfer to.
Yeah, so what additional, we're about to make another payment. How much of that money would we need to transfer into the sinking fund in order for us to be able to pay off the road?
Sure. So if everyone can flip to, I apologize, there's no page numbers on this, but it's the page titled Interest and Sinking Fund on your budget packet. So there you'll see that we have a balance, a fund balance of 1.4 million. We do still need to make a payment in late August or mid-August for roughly $304,000. Subtracting the tax note that we will have, the remainder of the tax note that we will have left to pay, we would need $221,000 approximately left to cover the tax note incomplete. So one proposal could be moving that transfer total completely to the INS fund to help cover that $221,000.
So when we talked about that earlier today, that number was closer to $80,000. It didn't take the complete transfer of that amount to go ahead and make that happen.
Yeah, I inadvertently left out the payment that was needing to be made in August. And then
Okay.
also we had a transfer adjustment for the economic development grants. It's being increased from 200,000 to 250,000, which decreased the transfer amount by 50,000.
So, and the amount that we need to transfer is
Have $142,000 for transfer needed. The tax note will need 221,000.
So the 142,000, and assuming that the Denton County Development District number 4 funds an officer, we have the budget in there for a 5th officer.
Yes, the
Right now.
budget yes, the budget packet right now includes the cost for the additional officer. So if,
If the cost of that additional officer came out, and again, I'm saying if we get where we got going on, that actually gives us enough money to pay the note off, and we're done.
the
the
transfer
town's
would
not debt free.
increase by approximately $80,000.
Yes, which takes it to, roughly 221,000. I mean, it's almost right on the money. Again, that would be my proposal, and we can finalize this after the 27th. But on the 27th, if we do not have, on the 27th, if we get that additional officer approved, my recommendation to the council would be we transfer that 221,000 and pay off the debt and put the town into a debt-free position.
What do we have our reserve fund at? Set for?
Our
Did we
reserve
raise that?
fund,
this year, or-
We left it at 3 months because that was kind of the argument before. 'Cause I was a proponent for 6, but we always kept it at 3. It's always been
right now it's at
at
3.
And what's that amount? Is it
300, right now our fund balance is 316,000.
16?
Yes.
See a problem? Dead on.
I think we should talk about that. It'll depend on whether we find. If we don't, yeah.
So let's do this because we need to, so we have not made a decision. Let's see what happens on the 27th. If on the 27th, we have not, if they approve it on the 27th, pull the budgeting out for the additional officer, add it to the sinking fund and move, and then move in to position us to be able to pay off the debt. If it does not pass, but again, the additional officer is, at that point, is still not approved. We'll have that final discussion on the 10th as to what we want to do.
But we'll leave
Is that
it
fair
as-
with everybody?
But we'll leave it as where it is today.
Well, we'll leave it in, but then we'll have a conversation to where we want to go.
They'll
If
stay
we're gonna do a survey, we can leave the money in there, but not authorize the hiring until we get the survey done. Or we can do multiple different things, but again, we're gonna do the survey, then we just kind of block it at that point. So let's see where we go on the 27th, because again, a lot of this discussion and this angst and this, that we're having right now could go away on the 27th.
No other major changes were made to the remainder of the funds. Just would like to point out, let's see.
Computer
Uh,
expenditures or maintenance was, yeah.
Yes, yeah, that was one transfer item that was included. So as part of our general fund transfers, an additional $3,000 was added to the vehicle and equipment replacement fund. And so that way the town is dedicating at least $3,000 every year, and we can be on a schedule to have sufficient funds to replace the server every 4 to 5 years if needed.
So we went in, I looked at all the numbers against cloud and doing all of these other things. We ran into some issues where there's some compatibility issues between some of the software packages we have today and going to the cloud option. So there were some things that kind of precluded us from doing that. So and we're still backing up the data so we can bring it back in. This is our most economical and most effective way of dealing with the situation. Like I say, I'm dealing with the same thing at work. I mean, everybody wants to modernize and move to the cloud, and going, stuff's not compatible. So you can want it all you want, but you may not be able to do it. So this is our best option. And the town did a great job of doing the staffing and arranging the meetings. We had some long discussions with our IT vendor.
And you'll see that reflected in the vehicle and equipment replacement fund. It's the second to the last page. That shows that in total, there's a transfer from the general fund for $21,000, but you'll see the breakdown. $14,000 is for the vehicle replacement, $3,000 for the server replacement, and $4,600 for police department and administration computer replacements. We're on a computer replacement schedule. And the purchase of the third vehicle is also in this fund.
But the vehicle that we're going to replace, what's the mileage on it, and how old is it?
It's not to replace a vehicle, it's to add another vehicle.
But you were saying that gets us to 3. We have 3 vehicles sitting out there.
We have Chiefs Tahoe. We have a 2016 Chevrolet Tahoe, a 2018 Chevrolet Tahoe,
So are we talking about a replacement vehicle, or are we talking about an addition?
an additional vehicle. Chief, are you on?
I am.
Chief, why do we need a 4th vehicle?
It's all based upon whether or not we approve an additional officer due to the overuse of the 2 vehicles that we currently have in patrol.
One car has mileage of about 30,000. The second car has mileage of 70,000, and the third car has mileage of 57,000.
So Chief, when we were at our department max, which I believe was 7 officers, we were at 3 cars then, correct?
If I can think back to that, we had 2 of I want to say the first expeditions that they bought. We actually had 4, and then we traded. We had 4, and then we traded 2 for 1. Because the chief at the time had his own take-home vehicle.
And I remember that absolutely. So. Okay.
My thought process on that is, instead of overworking, because you would end up, if we had 4 patrol officers, meaning if we had an additional officer, we'd have 4 patrol officers. We would have one of those vehicles running 24 hours a day. versus having, because the sergeant's going to need a car to drive also with that officer being on shift. And then if we have a vehicle breakdown or heaven forbid, we have two of them break down, then now we only have, you know, we're limiting ourselves to capability. So to me, it would make sense to have another vehicle due to one, we would be able to keep some of the mileage down on the older vehicles, and the wear and tear would also go down on them.
So again, the question becomes, so chief, I will tell you, yes, it's gonna reduce the wear and tear. All it's means is our fleet's gonna be older than it otherwise would, because we would replace that, one of the vehicles less often than before. The question that I would have is, when are those times when we need more than two vehicles at a time? What are those scenarios? And I say two vehicles because let's say, for the sake of argument, we assume one's in maintenance at any given point in time.
When you have the sergeant working and a patrol officer working and me working also.
How often does that happen?
If we had full staff, that would happen during the day. That would happen, I would say, you know, more often than not. There's a possibility of that happening.
If we had one more officer, that's not going to give you the ability to be able to have that level of staffing unless you pull officers off the evening to be here in patrol while you and the sergeant are here at the same time.
So if we had 24-hour coverage, we would have a day shift officer, the sergeant, and myself. Not saying the sergeant will work 8 to 4 every day, but there would be an opportunity for all three of us to be working at the same time.
Okay, so you're now as part of this conversation, you're now talking about taking the sergeant off of patrol.
No, not necessarily. No, he's still going to work, but it's going to free him up to do some more administrative things that he is stuck in the office doing already anyway, and not being out on the street.
So can you show us a staffing plan next council meeting?
Sure.
As to how you would have it with your current officers. In fact, actually, I want this in an executive session for you to give us a look on exactly what your staffing plan looks like and where you have coverage today and where you don't, who's covering where.
Sure.
You got 24 hours.
No, what I want to see is how they're utilizing those officers now, so we can sit there and make a decision as to how, you know, the discussion has never been that the chief and the sergeant are not on patrol. And in fact, we've always made it, you know, perfectly clear with all the chiefs that we've hired that they're working chiefs. They're going to be out on the streets and they're going to be covering during part of that time so that we can extend the patrol officers and so that we can get night. Again, the number of people that you need to cover this. So even if you do a basic calculation and say 40 hours a week, you know, or 40 hours per officer a week against the, you know, 24 hours a day times 7 days a week, you still need potentially one more off of that because there's going to be vacation, there's going to be training, there's going to be a bunch of other things. We're not even close to talking about that level of staffing, and that's assuming that you consider everybody available for patrol. If you now take the chief off of available for patrol, if you now take the sergeant off of available for patrol and say that you're going to have a patrol officer on at that same time, now our ability to patrol and our current staffing is 3 officers over the course of the week as opposed to 3 officers and sergeant, which means, you know, 33% more coverage of time. So we need to understand what that is because the discussion on staffing very much gets into how do you deploy the staffing you have today. Does that make sense? So I think we just need to understand what it is because as we have these conversations about what the coverage looks like, that's a big driver on how much coverage you have with the number of officers you have available. Well, again, if you want to get to the point that it's 24/7 or more coverage than what you have right now, and everybody needs to understand the fact that there is not an officer in Bartonville does not mean we do not have coverage. We have interlocal agreements. If it's something small, you know, you think of a trespass, there's not going to be a quick response. But if there is a response where, you know, again, the instances we talked, somebody got hit by a car. Guess what? Double Oak's going to be here, Flower Mound's going to be here, Argyle's going to be here because we've got interlocal agreements with all of those agencies, just like they have with us. But our officer, quite frankly, could be on a call too with the interlocal agreement. If it's a priority one call, it could be pulled out of the town. Something's happened here. I mean, we can war game these scenarios into the what ifs to the nth degree. But we need to understand, because if we're talking an additional officer, what does that truly mean? And are we satisfied with how the deployment is of the current staffing?
So you want to understand the additional vehicle expenditure as well as an additional officer.
I want to understand what the deployment is today.
Yeah.
So that we can take a look at it and say, that's acceptable with us or that's not. Then that drives the, okay, if it's acceptable that we are going to say there's more administrative stuff being on, we're going to sit there and say these resources are going to be dedicated to administrative staff so that they need additional part. That could drive the decision to say we need a fourth car. But
Right.
now we're taking, now we're talking about an additional officer, and it's not just the additional officer, but now we're talking about an entirely additional car and outfitting that car. I mean, again, so the costs are incrementally ratcheting up throughout this entire process.
Yeah, no, I
And we
get
just need
it.
to
I just
understand that.
think it would be helpful to see a, okay, yeah.
Staffing.
Yeah, but for 24, I like a proposed in the future, if we had, what that would look like, because I think we would use the vehicle. I think we, would, use a new officers. Some voice.
So you get additional vehicles, it's got to be maintained, it's got to be,
Understand.
and the question is, yes, you can extend the life of all of the vehicles, but would you prefer that you rotate out and get a new vehicle every 2 years or a new vehicle every 3 years and the fleet gets older? That's just a decision for us to make.
Yeah, and I think Chief can speak to that better than us, right? I think that would be helpful to have his view of that, right? He's driving it, he knows the wear and tear of it, so that's,
Absolutely. Although, yeah, again, this is where, unfortunately, my background kind of plays into this as well. Dad's a retired police officer, and he did the vehicle maintenance for his town, which is a significantly larger department. So again, there's a general feel, and at least, I've got a basis for asking some of the questions, and I've done military maintenance for some odd years. So, all right, Chief, you got your tasking.
Yes, sir.
Those are the major notes I had for the budget packet today. If I can help answer any other questions, please let me know.
thanks. Good job.
Jilly.
Okay, time being 7:40, we are adjourned. You want a quick 5-minute break
Please,
before we
yeah.
start? Yeah.
Let you get a head start.
How are you doing today?
That's okay.
So, is the one daughter flying? Oh, wow.
So
Wow. So y'all just had a big wedding.
But yeah, she just
She's
finished, she just got back from Pensacola. She just finished Rotary Wing. She's now
Oh,
back,
really?
she's now back at Corpus.
She's gonna fly.
No, she's not. She's Osprey. Tilt rotor.
Oh, neat. She's gonna fly that Osprey. Who's that?
Yeah, she is, her husband's gonna be a fighter pilot. She's an Osprey pilot. The next step is multi-engine, which is Corpus. And then from there, it is to New River Naval Air Station, and then, which will be for the Osprey training. Then she joins the fleet.
That's great.
Oh, she's getting close.
25th.
Beautiful.
I think we talked
Yeah,
about
it was-
last time
it
we're
was
going
great.
to
I was
Rome.
looking at you like him.
Oh, he's
Jumping on a
busy.
cruise.
We're
That'll take us
fortunate.
through Pisa, one stop in France, and then we're going to Malaga, Valencia, Barcelona, Spain,
She got off the payroll. She
Gibraltar.
got
and then
She does, but she's got a steady boyfriend too.
Good, good.
She-
Get her,
No kids,
get
no
her married
kids,
off.
all inclusive.
Well, no.
Brand new boat.
She's gonna be a
The
little
Atlas
slower.
Voyages are
afraid
just
that,
starting,
I think she's afraid.
and
this
it's
time.
100 rooms. That's all that's on the boat. 198 total passengers max.
Although,
She wants to live in Abilene?
Yeah,
No,
that's our
he
next.
does.
We want to go down the Danube. Go down the Danube.
oh, were you?
We're looking at a few different.
Seven, sixth place she is.
It's fine. Please.
You were right. Okay.
She got mad because one of her neighbors.
I like that
wrote
school.
something and
Do you?
said,
I
"Treat
do.
me like
Yeah.
an elderly or something."
Danube, yeah.
Keeps her busy.
Spirit, what breed? What's her name?
Well, Brianna's the oldest.
She's-
Yeah, the Free Spirit is Brooke.
Brooke, she's married.
She's married.
Yeah.
She is, again, still a nurse, and they just bought a house in College Station.
Cool.
So
Good.
he's going to get a master's in counseling.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
poor
not
guy.
today.
So, well, again, they want to stay involved with the church, and so that's, and his father just retired after the
Yeah.
Navy.
Yeah.
And so his GI Bill, he's passing to the husband, so he's gonna make- they buy the house because the GI Bill,
Now they pay for a lot of stuff.
it makes a lot of stuff.
Come on, everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's
Tammy, you know where Sylvia's been off?
one of my worries. However, the technology on the stabilizers on those boats, we're in the middle.
How many you got?
So we're in the middle of it on purpose. We picked the middle. Little bit. They've got the stabilizers, brand new boat. I mean,
Ladies and gentlemen,
first voyage-
time being 7:46, I call this regular meeting to order. Please rise for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Public participation. Tammy?
I have any speaker cards and there's no one.
Great, thank you. Perfect. Appointed representatives report. Jim?
Lifted up the microphone for a change. Yeah. Greetings from the Appraisal Review Board. I have you know that we finalized our portion of certifying the roll this evening, so it's gone to the chief appraiser. So tax money will be flowing someday.
Thank you.
The report that I have for you today is actually two pieces. The back page, I guess there's a back page, is there? It's got some information regarding what has been going on locally in the community and throughout the district in their participation. And one thing I want to bring to your attention, I know part of the deal about the fire district is we share information. We want to be reassured that we're protected against health problems, against damages to our homes against anything, right? Let me share number 5A. Have y'all ever looked at safer grants? This is how we're funding firemen without having the money to do so. Just you might want to look at it. I believe they fund the first year 100%, second year 60%, third year 30%, 60, 30. Yeah. Just want to let you know.
Sylvia, can you add that to your list?
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am.
Talk to Chief Lugo.
And speaking of Chief Lugo, give him our congratulations.
Don't know, I've seen you. I missed you last month. We missed you, Chief. I mean, Mayor.
So Chief Lugo ended up getting a chief's position in another town, so he'll be,
I didn't know that. I thought you meant about his literal doctorate degree, you know?
no,
No.
The big city.
Yeah,
He got-
So I'll see him tomorrow night then.
when you do, again, give him our best. We're gonna hate to see him go, but
That's correct.
it's always good to see a good individual get a bigger opportunity.
Wish him luck and all that humidity he's gonna have down there.
It's gonna happen to the one that's leaving eventually. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Because he's getting to that age. In regard to volumes, it's in a June, May category, if you will. There's 144 ambulance, 138 fire, total of 282, which put us on a path for the year of 3,400 runs for the year. That's pretty busy. Light sirens, a minute 10. That's for ambulance. 117 for the fire truck. Response time and arrival. Again, I timed myself driving over here from by the trailer park. Don't know where I was staying, right? Okay, 6:33 to 6:51. It took me 11 minutes to get over here. I just must be poking, right? Average time on scene when they're doing investigation, 17:33. Incident types for Bartonville, I just cover the first two. There are illness ones, 15, and motor vehicle with injuries, 2. And it gives you an idea of what the other communities are doing with the other 2. In regard to ESD communication pieces, I believe all those 3 are covered in the sheet behind. Anything you want me to ask? Got a meeting tomorrow night. First time in a long time we're coincided next to each other.
And thank you very much.
Thank you again, Mayor, for allowing me to do. Appreciate it.
Chief?
Thank you, Mayor, Council, staff. So again, my friendly little graphs are there. I have these are for June. Calls for service. You can kind of see what those are there. I totaled, let's see, I'm trying to read off my other phone here. 154 total for calls for service. If you see anything that sticks out there, please feel free to ask. Then the self-initiated totals, 147 traffic stops. And then you can see how the rest of it's broken down there. Obviously, our vacation watches and things go up this time of the year, which that totals 421. The Group A offenses, which is related to NIMRS reporting, the month of June, you can see those totals there. We had 2 assaults, 1 burglary, 2 drug offenses, one identity theft, I believe, and then we had a theft. Then the next graph there is for Group B offenses. We had 1 DWI, which was a crash. And then you kind of see the rest there are zeros. The admin totals for the month of June, I don't know if that's hard for y'all to read, but so the blue bar, I broke it down in each officer. The blue bar indicates how much time, and that's in hours, that are spent on admin duties. And that's everything other than going to the bathroom and eating. Sergeant Pillon had 32 different times he checked out in the month of June for 72 hours total. Officer Tolliver had 17 with 25 hours, and Officer Francis had 17 with 9 hours. Any questions about those?
What does sum of total mean? What is the orange
So
bar?
it's the way the pivot total words that. So basically, it's the total number of times they check out of service to put themselves on that
Got it.
administrative
Okay.
duty.
So the 70, so sticking with this good sergeant, 72 hours, and that was 32 transactions roughly to get to that 72 hours.
Right. Yeah. 14 day month, 12 hours a day. I don't remember exactly how that breaks down. 160 something hours, I believe. That totals 72 of those hours were spent, doing follow up on cases, whatever it is, the things that he does while he's there.
Okay.
Like Councilmember Sam said, we had our flock reads went up to almost 540,000 versus I want to say 512 or 517 for the last month. So these numbers keep going up. So that's all I have for you.
Hey, Chief, why is the theft in yellow? Under
That's
Group A offense, is that just by accident or was there a reason?
that's just that's how it did it. I can change that back to blue, but that's just how it did it. For some reason, that graph it popped up yellow.
Okay.
Is that
I can
theft
change
business?
it back to yellow. I can change it back to blue. That's just the way it popped up.
Was that theft business related or residential?
That was, I'd have to look. I'm not sure exactly what that was, but I will look and find out.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Chief.
Yes, sir.
Town Administrator?
Mayor and council, thank you. Just some brief notes. First, starting off with the finance report. Property tax collections continue to be significantly higher compared to the previous years, meaning that property tax collections are starting to at least even out. We're approximately even with 2020 collections to date. Sales tax collections also performing very strongly. We're already 11% higher than the budgeted amounts with 3 months left in the fiscal year. So sales tax doing very well. You may notice that contracted services are higher across several of our third-party contracting needs, and this is in line with the discussion we were having with the budget portion. Several of those needs are due to the 3 subdivisions and 2 commercial ventures that we have in progress. But where the town does have the ability to recoup fees, we will certainly apply that. Also included is the quarterly investment report for the quarter April through June with interest earnings of $4,347. Next is the animal control report with just 9 standard activities. Our engineer report shows work that was done towards construction plans for Marty B's Coffee Company. Those construction plans and the permit process is pretty much final. At this point, we're just waiting for the approval from the Emergency Services District related to their fire and sprinkler plans. But once we get that approval, we're good to issue our permit. There's also the review for the preliminary plats for the new subdivisions, street work towards work order 4. And that's it for the engineer report. To just kind of give you, we're still working towards the work order for the emergency work needed at the corner of Jeter and McMakin. The work order is not yet finalized, but we're estimating that it's going to be about $8,000.
So what did we determine? Because again, we thought that might be.
Yes, so first, the freshwater district took the first round because the hole was just over their easement as well. So they dug out or cut out a 4x4 hole and excavated it. But once they excavated, they saw that it was due to our culvert. So we have a culvert, a storm drainage culvert that crosses from that corner, catty corner, across this lease building right here. And the pipe goes diagonally. The pipe has shifted and disconnected.
Got it.
So we need to reconnect the pipe, pack all the subgrade back in, and then repair the road.
What we had was just, I mean, again, it was a sinkhole. It wasn't there one day and you drive by 20 minutes later and now there's, fortunately, on the side of the road, they were able to put cones around it without causing any major problems, which was terrific and good response by you guys.
Hey, Sylvia, I got a
Yes.
question about the stretch of West Jeter that we just paved, trying those different, I guess, techniques. What's the plan to like observe that? Like someone going back out every week or every month? Like, how do we know which portion is gonna be our
Sure.
standard?
Yeah, that's a great question. I can have our engineer come out and give a true assessment of how it can be done, but I think ideally it's at least over a span of a year. It's not something within months. It'll be throughout a stretch of time. But we do have stakes in the ground that outline where the division starts between the 3 different segments so that we can keep track of that over time.
Yeah, and to that point, Josh, again, that was one of my concerns when Jeff left. There's actually another citizen that would like to, that's got construction understanding, who would like to, volunteer their time to help work with the engineer and kind of keep an eye on that. I want to talk to town staff to figure out how we're going to do that and then, bring you guys in and see what you want to do.
Sure. Yeah, on that note, the engineer and I are working towards another just general work order for street maintenance, street repairs. So if somebody would like to be involved in the process, please let me know. That invitation's there. Next, the permit report just shows 6 permits. 1 certificate of occupancy was issued at the Bartonville Town Center for a new chiropractic service and 5 contractor registrations. The municipal court report has 91 citations issued and 83 citations that were cleared.
Thank you. Any questions? Consent agenda. Consent agenda consists of non-controversial or housekeeping items required by law. Items may be approved in a single motion. Items may be removed from the consent agenda by any council member by making such request prior to a motion and vote on the consent agenda. Item number 1, consider approval of May 18th, 2021 regular meeting minutes. Item number 2, consider approval of June 1st, 2021 special meeting and work session meeting minutes. Here we go. Yes, so we have a motion.
Make a motion, to accept the consent agenda.
Do we have a second? All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you, council. Item number 3, CUP site plan amendment. Public hearing to consider an ordinance amending the existing conditional use permit and site plan for the operation of the Equestrian Center and Animal Assisted Therapy located at 875 Porter Road, Bartonville, Texas, to amend the location of certain structures on the previously approved site plan.
Mayor, to give a brief summary of the application. So the applicant has applied to amend their existing conditional use permit site plan. They have a CUP for the operation of an equestrian center and an animal assisted therapy. The amendment request is basically to just extend the roof line. It's a 14-foot by 15-foot awning that will be added to the current structure. The awning addition is requested to help direct water outside of the horse arena. At the moment, the water is flowing into the horse arena and creating just kind of mud and a mess for the horses and for the arena. So included in the agenda packet is the updated site plan that shows where the proposed overhang or the proposed awning will be placed. There's also some pictures that give kind of a clear picture of where that extension will lead into. P&Z voted to recommend approval by 5-0 at their July meeting, and there have been no public comments or questions that were submitted for this item.
That was a question I was getting from a couple of citizens who were saying, hey, that started out as something fairly small and has grown. There is houses right across the street from it, and we've heard nothing from any of those folks. Okay.
No public comments.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, do we have the applicant? Please come forward, state your name and address, and add anything you would like to add.
So my name is Siobhan O'Brien. I own the property and run the Equestrian Center and Equine Assisted Therapy with my partner, Shelley Peters. It's been probably the longest process of our life to build this covered arena. We've had a wonderful wet spring, so it took a little while, which helped us see that the previous plan didn't take the northwest corner into account. So from my house down, everything drains. And so it just flooded the corner the whole time. So the builder, working with the drainage group, thinks that by putting drainage around, which is done, and covering that piece, it's a little bitty segment. We got the question in planning and zoning meeting, could we put more stalls there? It's not wide enough for stalls. The overhang is going to cover the space so that it's got the same look and feel as the previous awning, but it's really there as kind of an umbrella for that corner of the property.
Thank you very much.
I did forget to add that our town engineer also reviewed it and he found no issues because it's related to drainage.
Great, thank you.
Last thing, our neighbor actually came to give us support, so thank you. No
Hey,
problem.
where are you located? Are you one across the street? Okay, in new fire pit and all of that stuff? It's beautiful. Love it. So, okay, and honestly, that's what the questions I had was about y'all. So I'm glad you're here because you've just alleviated all of the concerns I was getting. Okay, perfect. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Time being 8:03, we open this public hearing. Do we have anyone that wants to speak in favor? Okay. And you already have, but please, we're going to add more. State your name and address, sir.
Charles Skelton, and I live at 950 Porter Road, directly across the street from said property. And they're fantastic neighbors. It's a beautiful property and they're doing a great job. And we think that it even brings more value to the community here. So
All right, terrific. Hey, thank you for taking the time to come in.
absolutely. Thank you.
We have anyone that wants to speak opposed? Time being 8:04, close this public hearing. Council deliberation. Do we need it? Do we have a motion?
Make a motion to we approve the item, which is item number 3.
We have a second. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you, council. Item number 4, public hearing to consider an ordinance granting a conditional use permit and to approve of a site plan to allow for the operation of a drive-through use located on a 0.684 acre site that is part of Lot 1, Block 1, Phase 2 of Lantana Town Center. The site is generally located in the northwest corner of 407 and Justin Road. Staff?
As a summary, the applicant has applied for a conditional use permit to allow for the operation of a drive-through that will be a coffee shop called Dutch Bros Coffee. The site is a 0.684 acre lot located on Lot 1, Block 1 of Phase 2 of the Lantana Town Center. So it's directly across from Kroger, across 407, next to the Casamia restaurant. The site plan was reviewed against multiple standards. It was reviewed against our general commercial plan development standards, our town general commercial standards, and also the Denton County subdivision standards that were in place at the time the plan development was approved. The site plan was reviewed by town staff, engineer, and our planner, and no issues were found. Some general notes about the site plan. Dutch Bros Coffee is a 950 square foot single-story building. The total parking count is 14 when the minimum count that was required was 10. So they exceed the minimum. The drive-through lane begins as 2 lanes and merges into 1, and it also meets stacking requirements. There are 2 proposed menu boards on the east side of the property located behind the building. There will be no indoor or outdoor seating. This is primarily just a drive-through, but it does have a walk-up order window, and that is proposed on the west side of the building, and it has a 5-foot wide sidewalk leading up to it. There are 2 proposed outdoor speakers for ambient music. One is located under the awning of the drive-through side building, and the other is under the canopy at the walk-up order window. The hours of operation are still not finalized, but they're generally in the window of 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. And the last thing to note is that drive-through orders are intended to be face-to-face, such as like the Chick-fil-A model. So a staff member will come up to your vehicle and take your order from your vehicle. P&Z voted to recommend approval of this item by 5-0 at its July meeting with no special conditions attached to the CUP. No public comments or questions were submitted regarding this item.
And I know where it's at, so I mean, again, it should not affect any of our residents.
Correct. It's not adjacent to any residential
How far is
Bartonville.
the closest resident, even if it's not ours? So behind it, there should be Lantana residences. How far back are they?
Behind it, I believe, is a golf course. It's just open land. I don't know the foot I can just do a general.
Speakers.
Yeah, I mean, again, we want to be, I mean, we want to be good neighbors with Lantana. And it's, you know, I think we've all learned from the Marty Means experience to make sure we put some things in.
This falls under they have a HOA, that whole subdivision falls under an HOA restriction. So I know that they're covered under that as well. So
So did somebody from that group take a look at this, or is this just?
it goes under that as well. They're the ones that issue the CO.
Okay, so they issued the CO originally. and we're just
They
because
have
of the
to issue,
drive-through.
they'll issue the building permits in the CO.
Amy, can you speak
Got it.
into? thank
They
you.
issue the building permits in the CO.
Okay, and this goes back to because all of that stuff in the Lantana side, unfortunately, we don't control it because it's to our chagrin.
So we review the site plans, but we do not issue the building permits. So it will be reviewed by their staff at some point.
Which I would expect them to make sure that it's covered from that perspective. Perfect,
So,
thank you. very
so question, let's say the noise causes an issue to a Lantana resident. Are they calling us? I'm assuming they would still call us,
But
but we would say direct back to them that, hey, that's your HOA that approved all this, so go talk to them. Okay.
much. Okay, is the applicant here?
maybe someone on Zoom.
Yes, my name is Eric Nunnally at 325 North St. Paul Street, Dallas, Texas. I'm actually the architect representing the owner.
Any additional comments you'd like to add?
Not actually. I'm just here to answer any questions.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right, time being 8:10, open this public hearing. Do we have anyone that wants to speak in favor? Do we have anyone that wants to speak opposed? Time being 8:10, close the public hearing. Council deliberation. Hey, council, do we have a motion? We have a second. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you, council. Item number 5, discuss and consider approval of a professional service agreement with America's Code Enforcement for code enforcement services beginning August 1st, 2021 through September 30th, 2022, and authorize the town administrator to execute same on behalf of the town. Sylvia, staff report, please.
So code enforcement services are proposed to be added. They would assist in the enforcement of our ordinances or any state laws related to zoning, subdivision, building codes. Largely, the majority of it would be likely trash, junk vehicles, tall vegetation, bar ditches, maintenance. The term of the agreement is set for August 1st through September 30th, and there is a 12-month optional extension if council would like to reauthorize it at that time. The price structure is $700 a month for 5 hours a week of code enforcement services. I went and asked for 4 different quotes, and this was the lowest quote that we got. It's also an added benefit that it's the same owner as All American Dogs. So there is that familiarity with the town of Bartonville in place. No budget amendment is needed for the remainder of this fiscal year. But should council choose to add this service, it would be included in the building inspection / code enforcement account line item for the next fiscal year budget.
Well, I was just gonna ask, they'd come once a week and they'd drive through and then send out, look for obviously code enforcement, safety issues, whatever, and then send out letters.
Yes, and we actually have a representative here who
Okay.
can give like a little more
Okay.
insight into what their processes are like.
And remember, you don't get to double charge us for patrolling for dogs and for code enforcement at the same time.
So actually, in most of our cities that we provide animal control for and code enforcement, we combine the two.
Can you
So
state your name?
we
for the
kind
record?
of kill two birds with
Oh,
one
yeah,
stone.
can you say your name and address and then?
My name is Kirk Sisney and I'm with All American Dogs, American Code Enforcement.
Okay. So if you're combining it, then are we getting more coverage than we would have before?
Yes, sir. That's kind of the way it works out. when we patrol for stray animals, number one, we're hitting all the hot spots. If I've got 5 calls at a particular address for their dogs getting out, every time one of us is in the city, that's the first place we hit. Sorry. And so with the code enforcement, it's a much slower patrol. You're focused more on high grass and weeds, trash and debris, junk vehicles. When you've got building permits, somebody decides to start building a shed on their property and they didn't get a building permit from the city, we cover that. All of those types of things that fall under your ordinances or state laws is what we're going to be enforcing.
So,
I just wondered how you know what our codes are.
I printed out most
You've
of
got to
them.
remember, is that all of them?
Not all of them. I did the tall grass and weeds, trash and debris, and the junk vehicles. Those are the 3 big ones
Okay,
that we usually find.
okay.
so again, the one thing that if we decide to do this, I'd like to see is potentially a couple of the council members or, me working with them to kind of make sure that we're doing this in the friendly Bartonville manner. The biggest thing that I like about this is we have had, I will tell you, on my road alone, there was things that were built that just, they were built and I lived there, but I had no idea that it was against code when it was being built. And then the new owners came in, it got grandfathered in because it'd been sitting there for 15 years. And that kind of stuff happens all the time. Or we had, in one circumstances, they faced their house the wrong direction because the way their property laid out, it looked like that's the way it should face. And in fact, it shouldn't have been. It should have been facing the other way. So the ability to catch some of those longer term things, these other stuff is nice because we do get, I spotted a refrigerator Sunday. Somebody dumped a refrigerator on Red Rock. Sylvia immediately got it picked up. I've asked Chief to, check the flock cameras and see if there's anything that we can, see on that. But those types of things are coming up and just getting them proactively so they do not disturb the citizens. And then one of the other big things is some of the culvert issues. So people's culverts get crushed. We're not dealing with that. And then the next thing it becomes a problem for their neighbors. If we had done it proactively, the other thing I want to see, hit, and you brought this up before, is the safety of all the turns. We've got a lot of areas where the brush just builds up. We could send documentation out to say, hey, you can't see because of where that brush is. Get that cleaned up. We solve a lot of those safety issues proactively, but to work with you directly to make sure that we're Bartonvilling, for lack of a better term, how we handle this, because we do want to be those friendly folks. Because normally 90% of the time in this town, when you bring it to somebody's attention, they'll get it cleaned up. And we don't want to treat everybody like that 10%.
My biggest support on this was to help Sylvia, because she's got enough on her plate to do without being running the streets of Bartonville. But having said that, one of my concerns as the mayor is 6 years, and a lot of these people, they're my neighbors, and we need to know what the procedures are going to be. We just don't want to send out a citation to someone saying, hey, you got to do this. You're in violation. I think we need to handle it with maybe stroke them a little bit, or with kids' gloves, and
So
without being overbearing.
every city gets handled a little differently. And the reason why is because, like, I have one city that is completely complaint driven. Citizens call City Hall. When we go by once a week, we pick up the list from City Hall and we go and look at those situations. I think a lot of people misunderstand code enforcement. If I can't see it standing flat footed in the public roadway, it doesn't exist. That's the law. And so I can't climb on top of my truck. I can't have binoculars. I can't go into the next door neighbor's house on the second floor and look down. And so it has to be visible from the public roadway. And Bob will tell you the same thing. We're not a laser. We're a shotgun. We kind of hit everything. We don't just, we've got a city that the city administrator wants us to be a laser beam. There are people she doesn't like, and she wants us to pick on that person.
So Clay, this is where, again, I would like to see a couple of us sit down and work with them. One is just take a look at the ordinances, because if we're going to take this proactive approach, we may need to adjust some of the ordinances. It may say the fine is the first step. We may want to add, the first step is a warning letter, and we want to put 30 days in there. Just to go through and make sure that we're comfortable, because we need to give him guidance. The other thing is there may be some things that, need to be proactively looked at, where we're sitting there saying, go and proactively enforce this. Other things where we look at it and say, that really is something more we would prefer to be reactive and complaint driven. I think we need to take a conscious report. If a couple of us spend some time with him, regardless of who it is, I think we'll get down to very quickly, what is a reasonable way and what is a way that we're comfortable with enforcing, because this is a change. This is a change with us being proactive on a lot of this stuff. Normally it's calls to Sylvia and that's what we want to get away from, because we've had a couple of things that have turned relatively nasty and took a fair amount of energy, just because, again, you're always going to have that 10% that wants to be obstinate.
See, that was going to be one of my questions was, what's going to initiate your call? In other words, do Sylvia, when you get a call, or Tammy, you get a call, do we give him that information and have him go out and check it out? Okay. So when you're out there driving the street and you're going to be out there for 5 hours a week, how, during that 5 hours, you're also looking for stray animals at the same time, is that correct? So how do you document what it is that you're doing so that we know that that 5 hours is included also in, that you break that out on a separate invoicing or?
Yes, sir. There's 2 reports that'll come out. There'll be an animal control report, the one that Sylvia already gets, and that's the report for all the animal control stuff. There will be a code report that'll come out that will detail by address and offense any warning or citation we issue. There's 2 separate reports.
So how many hours a week do we get right now for animal?
So depending upon how many calls we get, we may be into town. You get 1 solid hour to 2 hours a week of actual patrol within the city.
Okay.
But then for every call that we're here, we've been to an address here in Bartonville 3 times just the last 2 days to remove raccoons from live trap. So, I mean, we're in the city all the time.
So what I'm hearing is really our 1 to 2 hours a week goes up to 6 or 7 hours a week. And then what does that look like? Does that look like you're coming, how many days a week are you going to tell us you're going to stop by the town? Do we get a minimum of, if we contract for this and we're now at, again, 6 to 7 hours a week, unless you're called for extra stuff, how many times a week will you tell us you're going to be in town? Is that 2 times a week? Is that 3 times a week?
At least twice a week, if not more, depending upon the call load on the animal control side or the call load from Sylvia with a code issue.
Okay, because I would like to see in the contract that it says a minimum of twice a week if the council's comfortable with that. So that we're not saying you come in here for 8 hours a day and drive. I know you're not going to do that, and I know that's not the intent, but good contracts make good friends.
So question, a few concerns I've gotten, and this is
Sure.
something offense you personally, because I come from a state where this is an actual certified different position, right? So the questions I've gotten from some residents is what qualifies a person to do this? Is there certification, right? And what, because they want to know, well, who are you, right? So you pick up animals and dogs. And of course, it's nothing against you. It's just a question I need to pass on to you.
So we've all been through code enforcement class. Because I hold a master peace officer's license in the state of Texas, I am not required to take the code enforcement test to be a code enforcement officer. My qualification is higher than what the standard is for code
And
enforcement.
it covers
officers.
all of that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. And so both of my other officers who are doing code enforcement have been to the class. We're waiting for the state to open up testing so we can get them tested.
Okay.
Bob has also been to the class and has taken the test and is a certified code enforcement officer.
And are there classes that you have to stay up on, or is it just?
CE hours, yes, ma'am.
Awesome. And then you just keep up with our ordinances?
Yes, ma'am.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
But again, I think that's where we just need to go through against the ordinances and say, these are the ones we want you proactively doing, these are the ones we want you reactively doing, and make that consistent as.
So
to
can
how
I
we
make an
manage it.
example?
What's that?
One of our cities has very heavily wooded lots. So one of the things that the city asked us not to brush piles, because obviously you have limbs that fall down, you have storms that happen, you have these types of things. They have a part of their ordinance in their trash and debris is about brush piles. But the city asked us to kind of, unless it just becomes a bonfire or you have sunflowers growing up through it because it's been there so long, they ask us not to really push the brush pile issue because of so many of the lots are heavily wooded.
And that brush pile issue that you're gonna push was because someone contacted you from the city, asked you to go out there and look at that brush pile.
Yes, sir. Or if in our drive-by, we realize that it has become a fire hazard.
But again, Clay, I think this is where we want to sit down with him, go line by line through all of the ordinances, make sure, with those things, especially that we decide we want him to proactively enforce, that we take a look at and say, okay, does it say it's immediate fine? Or does it say that there's a written warning? And then do we want to sit there and make a list of everything that we'd like to see changed, give it to the town attorney, and then we go forward with making some changes on that before we start doing that?
We have to be consistent, so.
We have to be consistent, but we also want to make sure that we don't inadvertently put something into his hands that was not our intent. You know, it says, the ordinance says for whatever reason, we've never seen it, nobody's ever touched it in 30 years. He goes off and enforces it. And the next thing you know, we've got people up in
Ticked
arms
off.
and we look at it, going, why the heck did we allow that to happen?
Yeah, we have a lot of citizens out here, that been here for years and years, they're just country people. And, you know, kind of
I'm
know how-
country myself.
Yes.
Sylvia, do we get very many complaints for codes? I mean, do you?
Yes, I do. I get them often. There's particular areas that get them more often than not.
Most of that reflect,
The area,
no, the codes, the
oh,
violations.
tall grass, far ditch maintenance, junked vehicles, outside storage or junk outside. I've gotten some concerns about some possible homes not being in good conditions.
Safety issues.
Safety issues. Is that something that you all could help with?
So Clay, I would jump in here. So I'll use an example. I mean, we went over and had somebody in Brasher Estates that helped repair my motorcycle. You go past there, one of the neighbors, yes, Dale, you know who it was. But basically pointed out there was another house that they were taking four-wheelers and the four-wheelers were growing like weeds. Well, once they did it, got her engaged, she dealt with it, but it sure would have been nice if somebody would have caught that earlier. And then general road stuff, it's a second set of eyes on, on roads as you're driving around to see, hey, that there's an issue here that we should send somebody out to do. So, I like it from that perspective, but again, I would look for a couple of volunteers to say, we'll spend a little bit of time going through this with them and make sure we're comfortable. Okay, great. Thank you very much. So
Yeah,
we've got
just
two
to-
volunteers.
That's good.
So I think it sounds like this is something we may want to do, but we want to proactively start with sitting down with you and make sure that we identify what it is, proactive, reactive, and do we need to make changes to the ordinance?
And other than just complaints that you get, you'll be driving around looking. And then,
If that's the way the city wants us to do
okay,
it.
okay.
And what we want to do is we want to set the boundaries so you know exactly what we're looking
Exactly.
for.
Yeah.
Because again, we don't, we want to make sure, same thing we do for the police. We don't want to put you in a situation where it's want to make it as clear cut as possible.
So what, can you explain protocol? So he sees something, then it goes where?
He sees something and I'm assuming he takes the action of on city's
He takes
behalf,
care
writing
of
the
it?
letter.
For the
No, what
most part.
we have door hangers. It looks like we have
Okay.
a couple of different things. And so we make contact. That's one of our things that we do. I'm going to go up and knock on your door. I'm going to say, hey, I'm with the town of Bartonville, American Code Enforcement. This is the violation I'm seeing. Right now, you have a warning. You have 10 days to rectify that. And then after the 10 days, we can either, let's say they're working on it. It's a large pile of trash or a large property that's got to be mowed. Back during the early part of this year with all the rain we had, we let a lot of cities that they didn't want us to issue warnings for tall grass and weeds. I mean, you got to put floaties on the lawnmower to go do your yard. But when we started to draw out, then we started writing warnings just to remind people, hey, yes, sir.
So here's what I'd like to see happen, because again, this is the kind of details that, quite frankly, Jacqueline and Josh would like you to dig into of going, how are they going to do this? Are you guys comfortable with it saying, hey, it passes your sniff test? Is there anything you think you need to come back to the full council? And then let's kind of define this. So can we get some time with you, spend a couple hours, just kind of make sure you guys are comfortable with the general text, and then we enter into a contract with them and get down to the final details.
See, some people out there, he walks up their door, but he thinks he sees a violation out there. You open up the door, say, hey, I'm code enforcement. I'm gonna give you 10 days to go, you got this in violation. That's the wrong way to approach the citizens out here.
Well, and what we'll do is we'll advertise the fact that we are now doing code enforcement, and this is what we're going to proactively be looking for.
And we may want to give more than 10 days. I don't, there's
I mean,
different.
he just made this statement.
Yeah, but
10
what-
days
what-
is 10 days is
what-
minimum state law.
Sure,
10 days is
Whatever,
minimal.
whatever it is, Clay, the biggest thing is, again, do we want to do this or don't we? Because the biggest thing I'm looking for honestly is the things that we cannot fix after the fact. And then some of these things, some erosion issues where one neighbor is causing pain to another, and we could have quickly rectified that. I get where you're getting to, but I hate to say, I mean, there's always going to be the corner case. There's always going to be the corner case. We're going to have people that are going to get upset, but what we need to do is proactively advertise it. I'll put it in the letter that goes out in the Cross Timbers and said, we'll send something out saying, hey, we've got code enforcement coming out. These are the things that we're going to proactively be looking for. If they see something, we're going to put a door hanger and let you know that, we need to resolve the issue. You have 10 days to do it. If there's any concerns, this is where you come to dispute the code, the thing, and so that they've got that information. It won't be 100%, but at least people will know that it's coming.
Citizens just need to know they have an opportunity to contest whatever.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, and our phone number is on those warnings because I want the people to call me if they're not home. I want them to, so I can have that conversation. Hey, it was out, notice that you've got some high grass and weeds along the curb, kind of blocking the line of sight. If you take care of that in the next 10 days, we really appreciate it. So, I mean, we're not the Gestapo. We don't, not unless we absolutely have to be.
And if they're really pissed, Clay, we're just gonna blame it on you anyway.
Say Clay wanted it.
Just send it to me. I'll handle it.
But are you comfortable with that?
Yeah.
Okay. So again, can we get a couple hours with you and the council members to kind of
Sure.
talk through
Let
this
me
high
know when.
level, make sure they're comfortable with it? Let's bring it for the next council session, and then we'll approve something to go forward.
And we'll
assuming
meet
you
with
guys
him in
are
the interim. Josh and I'll meet with him in the interim.
Correct. And
Okay.
because you'll come back then to
Okay.
say, hey, you think this is a good idea, or you've got
Let
concerns.
me know.
Perfect. Thank you very much, sir. Item number 6, discuss and consider approval of the purchase of a computer server from Agent IT Solutions in the amount not to exceed $12,000. Staff report?
As the mayor mentioned earlier, we met with our IT consultant, Asian IT. They had told us earlier in the year that our server was going to need to be replaced, and subsequently it crashed in mid-June. And fortunately, they have loaned us one. They haven't charged us for it. So because of the backup, they were able to get us up and running within a day. So we didn't lose. We lost a little bit of data within the day, in between the day that it crashed, and they got us up and running. As the mayor stated, we did do a lot of research. Because of the police department, there's certain CJIS federal requirements for the police department. They can't go cloud. But just to give you a perspective, to go cloud would be a cost probably about $494 per month. That's without doing the police department. The server proposal is approximately $11,549, which would equate to about $321 per month for a 3-year period.
Again, it's the best option. We could debate whether we had to go
Yeah.
GovCloud, not GovCloud, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
We
So-
got to a point that it just wasn't worth drilling down.
And
into
it was a
that
lot, and
level.
it's a lot more space as well as what they give us, what the cloud would be. So we did all of that. The mayor met with our contractors as well. So this item is for approval on that. This would come out of the capital improvement fund. It is an expenditure that's that's considered through the audit, a capital expenditure. Again, we will come back in September with a budget amendment for some of these expenditures. Right now, after this expenditure, there'll be a balance of $44,965 in the capital improvement fund. So
Terrific,
that's
Tim.
what this.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Awesome.
Do we have a motion?
Yeah,
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the purchase of a computer server for Agent
Oh, happily.
IT Solutions in the amount of not to exceed $12,000.
happily second that. Good job.
All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you, council.
Can you happily accept that?
Okay, item number 7, discussion of boards and commissions, policies and procedures. Tammy?
All right, last year, in talking with Ed on some of the policies, so the council's practice every year has been to advertise for let me back up. The current policies state that we'll advertise beginning in April and end advertising the first Thursday in June. This got written years ago. we always extend that and extend it and extend it. Also, the policies state that the council will review, which you have done. The practice has been to review, and the council collectively together makes recommendation and votes on recommendations for your appointments. This conflicts what your code of ordinances say. So this item is to ask that I can update the policies and bring them back to what your practices are, to bring back some amendments to the ordinances. The ordinance actually state that on the planning and zoning and board of adjustment, that the mayor will appoint with council approval, bring back the appointments. For planning and zoning, it says that the mayor, the members shall be appointed by the mayor with the approval of the town council and shall serve for 2 years. It also says that the alternates shall serve for a full 2-year term, which basically says your alternates shall serve for 2 years. So if somebody was to move off, that alternate can't move up as a member, which you have been, the practice has been to do that, so it conflicts. So, and same as board of adjustment. So I wanted to bring back, amend the ordinances so they consist with your policies.
So, and again, that, I mean, however you want to do it, but we've always done it as a council, kind of brought it in there and had the discussion as a group. I think that's worked out reasonably well. I would recommend we continue that. Did we ever codify, you could only be on one board or commission, or was
No,
that
your
just a policy?
policies state, because there's times that you don't have any members.
Yep.
So what your policies currently state, you did amend your policies that state that. I can read.
We had someone available.
It states that they can serve, they can apply for another, that if there's not availability, let me find it. That they could serve on more than one board if there weren't enough applications.
Okay, perfect.
So if you couldn't get enough people to apply, then you could serve on more than one board.
And the history of that is we had a couple of times where we had a ton of people applying and we're sitting there going, we've got people on 2 boards. The idea was if we do have a lot of folks come in, that we make it as broad as possible, giving people an opportunity to serve.
Currently, you do not have any members serving on more than one board. So there was at one point you advertised, you couldn't get anybody to volunteer. So you'd have one person that may serve on more than one board, but you did change it so that the only way that they could serve on more than one board is that if you didn't have enough applicants.
So instead of having the mayor appointment, we can just reword it so that council.
I'm going to bring back amendments to the code of ordinances to make it
Yeah, the mayor's
match your policy.
never appointed them since I've been involved.
That's
Yeah,
what it
so
says.
it's just,
Yeah,
so
so
to
just
bring
clean it
that,
up.
and then to amend the policies to change it from beginning in April to start the advertising perhaps in May or June, because pretty much, and give it a 4-week policy, 4-week. There's a couple of other cities I've looked at their policies just to kind of tighten it up, to maybe start the advertising in maybe June and do it to a 4 to 6 week. I'll tighten it up and I'll bring it back
In
next
July or
month. And so give you to more be consistent with your appointment timeframe. And just to give you an update, we have had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Since we started advertising, we do have 5 new applicants that are interested in serving. And we currently do have 2 vacancies, one on planning and zoning and one on community development. And I do believe that there is a board of adjustment member that I think is moving and may not be reapplying. And I think that's Helen Stewart. So I don't know if she's moved yet or not. But I did send out the reminder to all the current board members for applications. So I'll have something for you. Maybe at the meeting on August 10th, I can give you a better update of how many that you have. But there will be 13 positions that are either 15 between the vacancies and the reappointments that are due. But it looks like you have plenty.
So
How many of those positions have not refiled?
They're in the process of doing it now. I just sent out the reminders.
okay. Item number 8, review and update the ability to conduct official town meetings by Zoom and discuss the continuation of live streaming of official town meetings. Tammy?
On June 30th, the governor's office approved a request by the Attorney General to lift his suspensions on allowing Open Meetings Act for Zoom hearings. So August will be the last meeting that we can conduct meetings by Zoom. There, prior to that declaration, there is something in the provisions to allow somebody to conduct by video recordings. They're very strict and it's very hard to do. So those provisions weren't taken away, but the ability to do that is there's a lot of regulations in order to do
It's
that.
pretty difficult.
It's very difficult to
When
do.
the governor issued his COVID declarations, part of that was suspending the rules on open meetings to allow video conferencing to make sure that social distancing, et cetera, could be followed. In June, like Tammy said, the governor is revoking or lifting those suspensions, which means we go back to the way things were. And there was a feeling for a while the legislature was in session, that the timing was good to maybe reevaluate some of the Open Meetings Act provisions and see if some changes could be made in light of how well Zoom and Teams and all these different programs are allowing governing bodies to meet. But they didn't do anything. So they didn't change. So when the governor says, I'm lifting the suspensions, what he's saying is, we're going to go back to the way the law was before COVID.
So we have not had anybody try this, but theoretically then, let's say for the sake of argument, the meeting in August, one of us could be remote and participate just like they do if they were physically sitting here.
August.
In August.
In August, yes,
Yes.
not in September.
Not in September. So August, and we've had because we have public hearings already noticed, we will conduct it that way because we've noticed and we already have it up. So that's the last one we'll be able to do for all boards and commissions. And then the second part of that is that does not limit you though for live streaming. So in addition to doing Zoom, part of that requirement for Zooming is that we had to record and live stream our meetings. The restriction of lifting the Zoom does not prohibit us from live streaming our meetings. And I've heard comments from council members that they love the idea that we live stream, and I've heard comments that they don't want us to continue live stream. So it's up for discussion if you want these meetings to continue after August to be continued to be live streaming. We can continue to live stream we have the equipment to do it. We can still do it with the equipment that we have. There will just be no audience participation, nobody zooming in, nobody having conversations. The meetings will just be recorded live and up on our YouTube channel like they have been. In the process before this ban was lifted, I was getting quotes from from companies to upgrade the video and audio, the equipment for better audio and video sound. And fortunately, they like these microphones that we have, but just to better integrate with the system and cameras. So I'm still waiting for some of those quotes to come in, but it's at your discretion if that's something you want to continue to do, is to have that live streaming or live video.
So we cannot have Zoom participants at all after
Starting in September.
Starting in September.
in September.
I, for one, would enthusiastically support streaming after this because that's a great benefit to the community. Give them an opportunity. We try to get them in here. It's almost like pulling teeth, but I know that some people would listen to it. And I would support that. I don't know what we have to do to get that done, but this is what the other council wants to do.
We're doing that.
Doing it now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's no additional cost and it's no additional hassle
Yeah,
beyond what they're already doing.
I appreciate the transparency and I think, people will as well. So I'm an advocate.
And then
Looks
when
like
I get the quotes back,
good.
I'll bring that information back. I have a little bit of the other COVID money. I'll talk about that in the next item, but
Awesome. Thank
Terrific.
you.
Okay,
Good
keep
job,
doing it.
Tammy. Thank
Next
you.
one is, yes, receive a report on prior and current federal funding related to COVID-19 and a summary of the Federal American Rescue Plan Act of 2021.
okay. These items in a row. I need a break. All right. So over the past year, we've got government's given a couple of relief programs. So one of them was the CARES Act, which the town received $95,205. Of that money, the funds we have spent the balance through June 30th was $5,195. I have it completely detailed. If anybody cares to see where all of our expenditures are, I have to report to the county quarterly, very detailed where all of that funding goes, very specific what we can spend it on. They changed the reporting features on it twice on how they wanted to see it. And so we set up the fund and I set up the funding in our accounting software so I could report it easier. That money has to be spent by the end of December. Whatever is not spent gets returned to the government. I'm pretty sure we'll have that $5,000 spent by the end of the calendar year. Some of it may go to help improve the video equipment, which is something we can spend it on. With that said, in March of 21, the ARP was signed into law, providing $1.9 trillion for relief for COVID public health emergency. In that earlier this year, most of the state and local county governments have already received some of that funding. What trickled down is leaving the non-entitlement cities, which is what we're considered, is less than 50,000 in population. So through the Texas Emergency Management is managing that money for those cities, and we have to apply to that by August 2nd, which we're already in the process of doing. Of that, Bartonville will receive $442,277. It is Denton County is receiving 100, or have already received $170.7 million. Argyle received over $1 million. There's a list. You can see what every city received.
So, yeah, because again, so when Diane sent that nice little email, what can we use that money
Okay,
for?
so what can you use it for? Yeah, it's, and I will bring in more details. So this is just kind of a summary. You can use it to respond, and each of these categories even go in a little bit more depth, but to respond to public health emergency, its negative impacts, including assistance to households, small businesses, nonprofits, tourism, travel, hospitality. Respond to working your essential and COVID-19 public health emergency, premium pay for eligible workers. We don't apply for any of those. Provision for government services to the extent of reduction in revenues. We do not qualify due to COVID public health emergency relative to your revenues if you lost revenues during COVID in your full fiscal year. And then to make necessary investments in water, sewer, or broadband infrastructures. Not roads. Water, sewer, and broadband.
Well, let's talk.
So, and then
broadband
of those
becomes
categories, and I'll bring those in, there's not a rush. So again, we have to apply by August 2nd, which we're doing. They'll give the first 50% of those funds. And then a year later, you'll get the second 50% of those funds. Those monies you'll have to keep separate. We have to keep separate accounting just like we do. We already have the bank account set up for COVID. So those funds will get deposited into that. We won't be doing a line item. It'll just be a fund that we'll report, but we'll keep separate tracking that we have to report to the state. They can go back and cover fund anything from March 3rd, 2021 through December 31st, 2026. So as time gets closer and next month and things, I would try to come back with more things that give you a better idea of what they can be spent on, and whether you appoint a committee to look at how it can best. Diane Edmonds did say that she's getting a lot of information from cities for broadband. That tends to be, when I was looking at this, was going to be one of my recommendations, broadband.
Do we have full coverage of FiOS to everybody in the town?
And that's, and I've taught, my husband's in the telephone industry, and we've talked about that too, where you can't get a company that, you can't get a company that will come out here for as small as Bartonville is to put it in, because we're just not big enough.
Yeah, it would have to, I mean, as much as, and I am not a fan of Frontier. Lord knows their latest one, they lost the credit cards, but the question becomes, if we've got areas that are not covered, is there enough of an enticement for them to extend that? Because at least it provides broadband service, because unfortunately, your other is satellite, which is exceedingly expensive, is AT&T has ISDN coverage to part of the town, but it's an old technology, and when we used it, when it was up, it was great. When it was down for days before it came back up. I mean,
It's half of the Bartonville is not covered by AT&T.
well, again, it's we're the FiOS, yes, and we're at the very end stretch of it, even for those that are covered, which is why we lose it all the time. So
Anyhow,
more
just,
staff work.
yeah, so I just wanted to give you an update so that I know that email came out and I heard from some other city secretaries that Diane was sending stuff out. And I didn't want to put anybody that you're on a quick crunch timeline, that there is time. So as soon as those grants get awarded in the funds again, we'll get the first half, and then a year later we'll get the second half, but then deciding on the best program and the best, what we can find to use those funds on the best services for Bartonville. But again, we'll work it. I've got a whole printout of what you can and what you can't. If anybody's interested, I can email those links to
Can you email it out there?
And it just keeps going, and you have to dig further and further and further.
I'm sure.
But
Said at this point in time, excuse me, it's a thing that we find ourselves at this point in time that we have to sit here and just try and determine as to how we spend this money.
Yeah. it's very limited, but again, we'll bring more information to you.
Populace not understand that this money is not free and that we're all paying for it. I mean, it's nothing we're not paying for.
That's for grandkids.
You're on the wrong government body
what's
for
wrong with
that.
saying, hey, no, we don't want it, send it back and let someone else have it.
Don't get me started.
Okay, very good. Hey, thank you very much.
Thanks, Tammy. That's a lot.
Dale, Jim, it has been a pleasure. We're going into executive session, so have a great evening.
Kicking you out. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Oh, again, and then once we
You're
got
welcome.
somebody on the committee, it's changed their outlook, and Diane Edmondson helped us with that. I know, we finally made traction. Dale, have a good evening. Okay, time being 8:50, we are convened into closed session.
Give me one moment, Mayor.
Absolutely.
Get us off live here, please.
Bye, guys.
Can I read the town council to convene into closed session while you're doing
Yes,
that?
please.
Town council to convene into closed session pursuant to Texas Government Code, Chapter 551, Section 551.071. Discuss matters relating to consultation with town attorney as follows. Consultation with town attorney regarding legal issues related to Bartonville North plating issues. Consultation with town attorney regarding legal issues related